Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Um, just going to firstly mention the AFL's managed to have its grand final. The NRL's got its grand final this weekend. So, in regards to Australian sport, massive thumbs up that both the NRL and AFL have managed to complete their seasons. The logistical challenges that both the NRL and AFL have faced, especially this season, from where they were at the beginning of the season after last season with the disruption, how they managed to complete last season and this season, massive logistical achievement. The fact that fans were allowed in stadiums, the fact that very few games were rearranged, not I don't think any players tested positive for the coronavirus. Hats off to both leagues. There's been obviously controversy in both leagues as well, and we've discussed some of the issues that will no doubt be reviewed at the in the post-season annual reviews that both leagues have. Um, so yeah, thumbs up to both organisations in that regard. Obviously, the NHL pre-season games have started, so it's not long until the NHL season faces off and the first puck drops in the regular season in the NHL. Again, massive logistical effort, considering that last season there was a lengthy pause, the logistics there, the shortened season that we've just had in the NHL where the border was still shut, so there were a Canadian division and the re-division alignment temporarily, and how they managed to get um, hockey played in Canada and in the rest of the US. So again, hats off to another organisation managing to logistically sort things out. Um, Obviously, there has been some sports disruption. Some of it's political and terror related. Others is it's COVID related and again political. So the women's netball are not going from England to Australia. They've just completed their part of the tour to New Zealand. They're quarantining, then they're coming home. Due to the fact that the quarantine rules in Australia vary from state to state, that could have an impact on the Ashes. That's been discussed. Obviously, England and New Zealand obviously pulling out of test tours and one day tours. Pakistan with the T20 Cricket World Cup looming. That has implications for the ICC and the cricketing governing bodies, lost revenue. This is not the first time that cricket has had issues with security in Pakistan. We've discussed that before. Obviously, the Sri Lankan incident where the Sri Lankan team bus was attacked. Now, other nations have had issues with terrorism and threats against sports teams and individuals. With Sri Lanka and India and Bangladesh have also had issues with terrorism problems and security problems. Test series have never been fully abandoned, let's say, and they've never been on the banned test list. Obviously, South Africa with apartheid, they were boycotted, but now they're allowed back in. Even Zimbabwe are allowed to host test matches, even with what's happened with Robert Mugabe and the current um, situation in Zimbabwe. So what's happened with Pakistan is quite serious. It does have implications, and the ICC questions will be asked. Now, the PCB, which is the Pakistan Cricket Board, are not very happy with the decision by New Zealand and England. They're lodging a complaint. They say it's politically motivated, etc., etc. But I think the last team to successfully play a Test match in Pakistan was the West Indies. Um, we know that the Pakistan Premier League, which is similar to the IPL, lots of players from around the world have played there without incident. So obviously there's something going on in the background. It's being discussed on the channel. We'll just have to see what occurs. Um, Obviously, I the Derby County situation is still ongoing. There's still the threat of players not getting paid at the end of the month, the non-playing staff not getting paid. They're in administration. There's still a lingering threat of a further 9-point deduction at Derby County. There's still the threat of liquidation now. The signs are that Derby County there will be a solution, more likely than not, from reports coming out. It's not certain. If Derby County were to go bust, it's a bigger version of the Bury situation 2 years ago. There will be knock-on economic impact felt for the rest of the championship because obviously they would have budgeted for crowd numbers, ticket sales, what their ticket price will be, merchandise sales for those matches home and away, their take of the revenue, ticket revenue and merchandise sales revenue, and even if there's still programs sold, a percentage goes to home and away teams, and what percentage goes to the Football League and the FA, because a percentage of ticket price does go to the governing bodies. That impacts profit margins, and we do know that there's a lot of clubs in the Football League that are seriously financially in difficulty. Um, there were, this time last year, club chairman was saying we are in trouble. At the beginning of the pandemic, the Huddersfield chairman said, "Look, 50 to 60 clubs, not just a handful, will be in serious trouble if we can't get crowds back in and a financial solution. League One and League Two are coming up with the idea of a salary cap. There's question marks over football governance, the financial fair play, the financial spending rules the Football League have imposed, which is another question mark over the Derby County situation with the stadium sale, where it was overinflated to meet the revenue rules that the Football League has in place that are weekly enforced. I believe only Birmingham City have fallen afoul of that. There's about 20, 30 clubs under the Football League umbrella that would be in breach of that. If we're looking about clubs in debt, when Berry went out of business, as I said, I've said this multiple times, the Accrington Stanley chairman at the time said that's cost us £250,000 to £250,000 just for those two games. That's not including if they were to meet each other in the League Cup and FA Cup. Straight up, guys, just the two league games has cost us £250,000 in lost revenue alone. Just alone. That in itself, for a club of Accrington size, which is on the smallest budget in the Football League, is hammer blow to their finances. Just imagine what would happen if Derby County go under. The lost revenue, not just for one club, but the rest of the league. Ridiculous. So a solution has to be found. It's in the best interests of both the Football League and the FA to find a solution. Obviously, for Derby County fans, a solution that's positive would be an outcome. Obviously, they're most likely going to get relegated, although the record this season under Wayne Rooney is actually pretty decent. They were 12th in the league at the time the penalty was imposed, so there is hope that they can play their way out of trouble. Gotta have a cup of tea in the morning. There is hope that they can play their way out of the situation and avoid relegation by playing well enough. At the same time, they are under salary constraints, so technically they have actually been hit with a salary cap. They were hit with a transfer embargo in the off season, and they were only allowed to sign free agents. This time in July, so 2 months ago, they had 8 players on their books that were full-time senior professionals, not including youth players who they would have been forced to promote to the senior team otherwise, which basically means they're putting out a reserve youth side, which is ridiculous. So they had to allow them to sign some players in order to make sure the team, but they're not the only team that's faced a situation with financial difficulties in the past. But it is telling that the current owner Mel Morris has said, "I've lost 200 million on this club in 6 years." Now, if you take COVID out of it, no one should be losing that much money in that period. There's something seriously wrong there, especially in football, which is a license to print money in the Premier League, and to a certain extent the Championship. It is a license to print money. Even if you're in the lower leagues, if you're a well-run club, you should not be in any debt. If you're well-run, and Exeter City is a prime example of a club that basically is owned by the fans with a percentage stake and is well-run enough to actually rebuild St James's Park in Exeter. That is a club that's well-run. It's the model club, basically. Small scale, admittedly, not Premier League levels, but that's how a club should be run. There is no way a football club should ever be in debt. Football as a sport is a license to print money. However, that's in theory. In practice, however, the TV rights are heavily skewed to the Premier League, and only a handful of clubs in the Premier League make real big money out of them. The so-called Big Six, even though Tottenham and Arsenal are winning no trophies this season. Let's not kid ourselves. Seriously, let's not kid ourselves there. That's laughable that Tottenham claim they're part of the Big Six. They haven't won a trophy for, I think, 2008 was their last trophy. So they haven't won a trophy in over 14 years. So something like that. So and I don't think any of that squad are still playing. So I had to tell you something. Gotta have a cup of tea. But all told, if you are a well-run club that's well-run, properly owned, transparent, you shouldn't be in any debt. The fact that Barcelona's got 1.3 trillion, 1 trillion, God, I was going to make them in more debt than the US economy. If a club like Barcelona are 1.3 billion euros in debt, the system is broken. The system is broken. How and Ronald Koeman, I mean, crikey, he's under a lot of pressure. But Barcelona can't actually afford to sack him. They have no money to pay out his release clause. they need another club or to approach to sign him as their manager, so they have to pay the release clause rather than them paying him out. Well, do I think Big Trouble's an understatement? If the fact that they're actually owned by them, it's owned by its members. So you and I, if we wanted to become a Barcelona member, we could. It's like being a member of a political party or a trade union. You pay your annual subscription or your monthly subscription, your fees, and you have a right to vote on matters such as electing, in this case, a club president. So the Barcelona fans, you can become a Barcelona member. You can be a fan and not be a member, but still have a party interest. The club membership in some of these clubs, like in Spain and Portugal and in Latin America, yeah, you pay your membership fee. I don't know how much it is for a club membership fee at Barcelona, but Big Trouble is an understatement. 1.3 billion euros, or 1.3 billion pounds. It's something about, yeah, 1.3, nearly 1.5, nearly 1.5 billion in debt, whatever currency denomination. It doesn't matter if you're using euros, pounds, or dollars. They're in trouble. They're in trouble. It makes you wonder where the Neymar transfer money's gone. It does make you wonder where, all the prize money they've won, winning all these Champions League, La Liga titles, Copa del Rey's, TV money. It makes you wonder where all the transfer fees of players they've sold have gone. Um, it makes you question the situation completely. Yes, they do have a number of sports teams, same as the Scandinavian model as well. A lot of the Scandinavian sports clubs will either will actually be football, basketball, bandy, and ice hockey. And you'll see that logo if you look at some of the other sports channels on the internet. You'll see that they'll do like logo rankings and uniform rankings, and some of these clubs have multiple teams in a sport. In sport, so yeah, Barcelona, same as Real Madrid, etc. All the Spanish La Liga clubs, pretty much a community-based sports clubs where tennis, volleyball, swimming, athletics, uh, roller hockey is actually quite popular in Spain and Portugal, and is a professional league. The fact that they were spending like I think €1 billion or something stupid on revamping the new camp, they were planning to invest stupid money in revamping the new camp. But look at Valencia, the Mestalla that they've been trying to build that for 20 years. Valencia is another club in Spain that 20 years ago was challenging Real and Barcelona for dominance. They actually won some of the Liga titles. They won Champions Leagues. They're bankrupt, and that's why David Villa had to leave Spain. And David Villa had to leave, sorry, Valencia, and move on. They couldn't afford to keep him. Reyes left Sevilla because they had money problems. Um, yeah, it makes you question where, because their main revenue stream obviously is football, but they have a very successful roller hockey and basketball and tennis facilities. I mean, Barcelona have other very successful teams. Admittedly, it makes them less money on revenue, but it does make you question the transparent. I mean, I was watching a documentary on YouTube actually, and apparently 25% of professional football clubs are not transparent about their finances, their profits, and their losses, and 40% of football governing bodies, so local domestic FAs, are also not transparent on their finances. 1 in 4 professional football clubs do not disclose their finances because there is no law forcing them to. There's no FIFA or UEFA or CONCACAF or whatever federation they're under. There is no um, FIFA rule saying clubs, no matter the ownership state, has to disclose their finances. So if you imagine, let's say we've got 92 football league clubs, but there are obviously professional clubs in the non-leagues. Let's say the top 100 professional clubs in this country, 25 of them, in theory, are not disclosing their finances. That's where the problem lies. That's why Barcelona, one of the reasons why Barcelona have been allowed to get in this situation, why Derby County are in this situation, why we know that Southend are facing a winding up order from the High Court, and they're trying to delay that. If 1 in 4, the Premier League's a prime example. 4 of those Premier League clubs will not be disclosing their finances, which is why Liverpool, when it came down to the European Super League, when they were approached about declaring their income, they were the only club to refuse to disclose. The other 11, in some way, shape, or form, disclosed their finances for the previous tax year. Liverpool did not. The fact that, yeah, 25, roughly 25%, give or take, rounding up, rounding down, around a quarter of professional football clubs don't disclose their income. And I was listening to another YouTuber, and I left him some critical feedback without effing and blowing. I said, look, there's a reason why you've got like 4 subscribers and this video's got 5 views. You're talking about sports, you'll say the title sport corruption, yet you're actually mentioning a lot of politics, and you're talking about fans not being interested who owns their caddy conversations. And I just basically ripped him an arsehole saying, you don't know what you're talking about. You are naive, you are ignorant, and you're basically tarring. You're going on about football all the time, but you're not discussing the actual sports corruption scandals. You're just talking about like politics all the time. Politics has got nothing to do with basic professional sports corruption. It's got a lot to do with Olympic and governance corruption. But when it comes down to individual athletes and teams and organisations that aren't governing bodies, it's got nothing to do with politics. The aftermath has to do with legislation, but the reasons why it's got nothing to do with politics, really, unless you start discussing legislation. So yeah, I just had to leave a comment. I'm saying there's a reason why your channel sucks. You are. I was going to put down you're arrogant. You clearly are white middle class lefties, but I thought I'll leave that comment out of it just in case YouTube went, no, can't have that. But they were kind of their superiority complex, but they didn't actually know what they were talking about, even though they might have got university degrees. You might have got great education, have no knowledge. Oh shit. Right. Finish my cup of tea. But no, the members have a. It's like if you have like an annual general meeting, a shareholder meeting. So if you buy shares in a company, doesn't matter if it's on the stock exchange or it's not even, or it's privately listed or publicly. It doesn't matter if you invest in a company, you have a right to have sit on board meetings. So I could buy shares in. I don't know. Right now, I think the share price of some of these oil firms is probably spiking because of the profits they're making with all that, due to a so-called fuel crisis, which is media speculation, by the way. In theory, yeah, you I don't know if you own any stocks and shares. I don't. I know some members of my family do. But in theory, if you are a shareholder in a company, be it if it's on the stock exchange or it's private, you have a right to board meetings. And you have a right to know where your investment is going. If you invest in a company, you have a right to sit in on decisions the company takes in expansion, contraction, mergers, sale of assets, production quotas. And in this case, if you're paying a fee to an organisation, you should know. Oh, my pension fund does as well. But you should know where your money is going. Plain and simple. You should know where your money is being sent. And so the members regularly vote on presidential elections, and the presidents will say, "This is my outline for the club going forward, where we're going to invest." And they've all focused on Messi. They got basically obsessed with one asset rather than all the assets, and they built around one particular asset that wasn't going to stay there forever. And in the last couple of years, was saying, you know what, when my contract's done, I'm leaving. And he tried to use a clause in his contract. And some of the contracts they've signed are weighted towards the individual, not the club. So it's really hard to get rid of Ronald Koeman now. I don't think Ronald Koeman actually now wants to be there, to be brutally honest. He's stated it's going to be a rebuild job. They're going to have to make some tough choices. And I feel sorry for Ronald Koeman. Whether you rate him or don't rate him as a coach, and you can be critical of his coaching style, I think within reason, you can say he's good or bad, or his certain style of tactics suits certain leagues or certain players. He's on a playing standpoint, he's in a no-win situation. However, his contract, he's in a win-win. He either sits out his contract and gets his money, or he gets sacked and gets his money. But Barcelona don't want to keep him, but they can't afford to sack him. they need another club or a national team to come along and say that we want someone coming to coach us and pay his get out clause. So they recoup some of the cash. Otherwise, they're paying him €6 million. And that's before bonuses. So if he sits out, if he fulfills his contract completely, they have to pay him performance bonuses. And if they sack him, well, they don't have to pay him performance bonuses. They have to pay him a full severance fee. It's in his contract. And he's not getting a lot of support from the board and the new president, Laporta. The previous president, caused a lot of the problems, but the current president was a high-ranking member of the board from the previous president. So you're replacing one problem with another. Well, Barcelona managed to weather the financial crisis just over a decade ago. Football, at the top level at least, kept making money in the top leagues. Some clubs in the top league struggled, but in general, the revenues kept going up. 5 years ago, on the 2015-2016 season, after that season, when there were protests about the cost of ticket prices and all that, there was an audit done, and with the FA and the Premier League, and half the league said they could let us in for free in the Premier League, and out of the remaining 10, I think half of them could have let us in for less than 10 quid. Some were still saying, no, we're going to charge you what we're going to charge you. Like, we need to maximise our profits to protect ourselves from further financial issues down the line, because no one's guaranteed to keep making this money. Pragmatic owners, right? But they basically said over half the league could let us in for 10 quid or less, basically, or for free. That was found to be a lie. But Barcelona, I think the issues with the financial problems at Barcelona, and I think at Real Madrid, predate COVID by a long way. We're going back a long time. And they have been exposed by football not being played. And fans not being allowed in stadiums, and TV deals being renegotiated and worth less money. That has exposed football in general to the excessive, uncontrolled spending, the weak governance. I keep going back to governance. And the financial fair play rules that Alexander Serafin wasn't in charge of UEFA when financial fair play was drawn up under Platini or whatever. When that rule was brought in, following, I believe, the 2008 financial crash, Serafin, who no one had heard of it, right? So it's not his fault that fair play doesn't work, but his statement saying it doesn't work, we need a new system, but no action's been taken on that, is a problem. This European Super League has nothing to do with the quality of football. It's a short-term cash grab because these clubs they're ruined, and they've had state aid in the past, but under UEFA rules they're not allowed that anymore. So they can't be bailed out by the Spanish government. But I'm not even sure if the Catalan regional and the Spanish national government have any money to bail them out anyway. If I'm being brutally honest. So there is an issue, and it's a long-standing issue, where they thought they could get away with it's the same principle as the financial crash in 2007, 2008. Because of weak governance and regulation in regards to, as I say, 1 in 4 clubs do not disclose their financials, which says that there's a bigger problem than just weak governance. That says there could be corruption that's just been got away with because no one's forcing these clubs to disclose what they make and what they lose. So what revenues and expenditures they have. If you're not forcing your members to be transparent, and there's no rule saying you have to be transparent to the wider public, it says that there are some deals being done to avoid punishment for financial irregularities. And the last club I can think of that got properly done for financial irregularities is Boston United, and that was nearly 20 years ago. And we're going back to the days of FIFA 2004, 2005. I remember Boston United when I used to play footy manager back in the day with my mates and some of the older footy managers about 15, 20 years ago. Boston United actually were docked points for financial irregularities. And when you're spending money you haven't made, when you're banking on investments down the line, right? When you're projecting finances in this case, football, on a player, projecting this guy's going to be he's going to be a money maker, and the player ends up being a bust. When you're investing a long-term contract with a player who then gets injured a lot, it's the same where in the NHL, Carey Price is on $10 million US a year, right? And at the time that contract was signed, there were question marks over Mark Bergevin, the GM of the Montreal Canadiens, going, this contract could hurt Montreal 5-10 years time. It's like the Di Pietro contract with the Islanders, or the Luongo contract for the Canucks, even though he ended up playing for Florida. But as he retired, the Canucks take a buyback penalty. Some of these contracts were ridiculous. The Islanders are still feeling the effects of the Di Pietro contract. I think it's either getting finished this year or next year. So even though he hasn't played for forever because of injury, he's still getting paid on LTIR. Carey Price, while he's getting his contract's worth 1/8 of the salary cap, he's injured half the time. He is injury prone now. His career is not going to last the length of the contract. He will retire before then. Montreal are stuck with this lead weight in a salary cap system. Now, in European football, you don't have a salary cap system. You have a financial fair play system, which is very loose in its interpretation. Because some clubs just clearly can get away with it, and other clubs get pinged up because they're an easier target because they have less financial clout or less clout within the game. Anyway, that's another debate. It really is. The issue with Barcelona and to a certain extent Real Madrid and Juventus and the European Super League idea is you have to look at the table of the teams that are, well, they all are. Like the Neymar transfer, he's only played half the games he's been eligible for. He's either injured or suspended, and always on his sister's birthday. And there's obviously that ongoing gag that he's fucking his sister, which is ironic. But Neymar, since the transfer, has only played in half the games he's eligible to play for PSG. He's either been suspended or injured, or unavailable for personal reasons. Literally half the games that he could have played, he's missed. So for value of contract, you're not getting value for money, and you never will. But yes, the amount of players who you would class as a bust, absolutely. And even now, some of the Championship wages are what the Premier League and wages were 10 years ago. The Championship cannot afford and sustain the wages that players are on. This is what Portsmouth found when they tumbled through the leagues after they basically were robbed of all their money by Milan Mandaric and Harry Redknapp's dog. We all know that they were on the take. The fact they got away with it is laughable, but that's just financial trials, and fraud trials are fraught with difficulty in prosecution, and they're very complex. That's one thing I remember from my law studies is fraud trials are very difficult, and I think there's rules saying that juries aren't necessary for fraud trials due to the complex nature that your average civilian who's called up for jury duty, your average citizen wouldn't be able to get their head around. You need high level accountants to industrial accountants to break down the goings on in the fraud trial. But Portsmouth, they had players on Premier League contracts in League Two at the time who they couldn't shift in the transfer market. They just couldn't shift them, but they were still having to pay them. Even if they sent them out on loan, they just couldn't shift these contracts, and they had to honour them. Otherwise, they risked being taken to court over failure to pay out. So yeah, there's a lot of speculation in football that this kid's going to be the next superstar, and then they have a decent season or two, and then they flame out. I mean, David Bentley, he actually, when he stated since retiring that football was ruining the game, and he's a brilliant player. Of course, I say that as a Blackburn fan, but even playing for Tottenham or Norwich or Arsenal, David Bentley, brilliant player, retired young, not because of injury, but because he fell out of love with the game because of the he was looking at the salaries going, and I'm well paid, but this is I'm done. He lost the love of the game. Do I think rugby's getting down the same route? Rugby's already. I mean, this United Rugby Championship, which is basically the Pro League, it's just they've rebranded it, which doesn't solve the problems that league has financially. They're trying to do the regional. Scotland and Italy are in a division. Ireland, South Africa are in like a division, and Wales is in a division. They're trying to, the South African and Irish are in two divisions. Scotland and Italy are in a division with their teams, and Wales get their own division. So they're trying to make it like regional divisions to increase competitiveness between rivals. They're just rebranding a competition that's already failed and financially. "Oh, we'll just change the name." No one realised that the teams are still basically financially stuffed, and there's still financial uncertainty, and the plan with Welsh Rugby especially to try and merge teams together. The problem with Welsh Rugby is they drop the place names from the franchises, so what the uh, uh, it's the Cardiff Blues, it's the Netherlands Scarlets, not Scarlets and Blues. What the Blues? What region do they cover? What province do they cover? Because at least with like Leinster, Connacht, Munster, and Ulster, you know the geographical area they're pooling their youth talent from. Edinburgh and Glasgow. I mean, Zebra is basically Ironi, which is Brescia basically, and Treviso is Treviso. So at least with the Italian, the South Africans, yeah, there is a place moniker with those franchises, but the Welsh regions they dropped the place names where they are recruiting like Neath, Cardiff, Llanelli, and Swansea. You know, and Gwent. You know, they yeah, but they've dropped the place names, and I find that ridiculous. What's the so as a fan, who do I support? Well, do I feel a connection to an area? No. And then you look at the Welsh Premiership, which is beset by doping, endemic. I've watched several documentaries in regard, and I'm going back like 5, 10 years, and there was a BBC investigation on Inside Out, and it's on YouTube. Um, and well, the Welsh Rugby Union own them because own the Dragons because they're bust. Because one of the reasons why we ended up with the Pro League was when professionalism came along, the Welsh Rugby went bankrupt completely. Welsh Rugby went bankrupt, and every time Rugby League tries to grow in Wales, the Welsh Rugby Union try and kill it rather than accept, evolve, and adapt. They just try and kill it rather than live in coexistence, which I think is Rugby Union and Rugby League's problem. Is they still have these old boys clubs where it's us versus them rather than working in unison to grow both codes and develop the infrastructure where you could have a dual club where league plays in the summer, union plays in the winter. The facilities are used more regularly. There's more outreach in schools, both in the north and the south. They're trying to kill each other, and in the end, they're killing themselves. London Broncos are now part time. How can that be? That yeah, they've had to go part time. It's ridiculous. Shambolic even. Um, and yeah, the future of the game is bleak in the south, very bleak. But that's down to the RFL and Super League. That's down to the governing body and the TV deal. Rugby Union again. If Saracens win the Premiership this season, it makes a joke out of their punishment in regards to the salary cap because they basically kept the squad together apart from like a couple of players. And from what I can gather, they haven't really taken any pay cuts, which then just defeats the object of having a salary cap that you sign up to. And they're trying to ring fence the Premiership, which will kill the game at the lower levels. So that's the RFU and the, the investment capital investors. Um, so, like, it, basically, the the situation in regards to um, the long term health of both league and union, it doesn't matter. I mean, the debate was had when 2 years ago Augustine Pichot was going against Bill Bowman for the governorship of World Rugby to be the top boss. His platform was we need to sort out the money side of things. We need to distribute the wealth better. We need to grow the game at grassroots. Top end talent needs to take a pay cut. So the up and coming talent and the wages are more evenly distributed. Yeah, no, they voted for the other guy, the old boy. We're not going to listen to this Argentinian guy. They've only been professional for a couple of years. Let's not listen to him because he has a brain. No, we'll keep doing what we're doing. And but basically, yeah, rugby union and to a certain extent rugby league. I think rugby league is a bit more. Well, I follow it obviously in Australia and New Zealand, but in the UK and France, it's in deep trouble. Over in Australia, the logistics they've got behind it in the NRL to a completion in both seasons since the pandemic started renegotiate the TV deal, having no games since the resumption of play um, last May cancelled. They've managed to get all games played that have been scheduled since I think May 28th last year. Not a single game has been called off. A couple have been rearranged due to short notice changes, but not a single game has been called off. Not a single player has tested positive for COVID. Um, you know, that considering what's happened with Australia, especially since June, and with the state of Victoria throughout this period, has been nothing short of miraculous. The same with the AFL, and we can all criticise, the AFL style of play and certain things about Aussie rules, and it could be a slightly cleaner game. Hats off to both organisations. Um, the, we could learn a lot from discussions with government between professional sports organisations and regional governance and national. Um, you know, within the space of like 48 hours, they moved the entire competition to Queensland in the NRL. They had a plan in place, and they just went, "Yeah, cool, that's what we're going to do." Um, so, like, it's it shows what can be done with the threat of financial extinction. Um, and yeah, like on the rugby side of things, like Welsh rugby is in a financial mess. But I have my running battles with Welsh Rugby Union fans, and I have had for a very, very long time. Um, I'm not very popular with Welsh Union fans, and to be honest, I don't care. I don't particularly like them either. And it is a minority, but they can't accept criticism, and they've got this chip on their shoulder. And how many World Cups have they won? How many World Cup finals have they been in? Oh, yeah, none. Um, I don't like the style of play they play, and to be honest, rugby union for me, I'm enjoying it less and less. It's like football. I'm enjoying both union and football less and less. Um, there are massive governance issues in both sports. There's massive financial issues in both sports, and at some point, um, you know, changes need to happen, need to occur. How and when those changes happen is we'll have to wait and see. Um, but yeah, it's it, it is very, very interesting that, yeah, when it comes to the international side of the game, they're toxic. When it comes to the domestic side of the game, they barely support their provinces or the Welsh Premiership. There's a reason why Welsh rugby is a financial shit creek. Is there's no money in it. And then you have to question what the TV rights have been agreed with, what broadcasters for what was the Pro League, which is now this United Rugby Championship. You have to, yeah. Then you have to look at the TV deals that have been struck, and then you have this is one of the reasons why Super Rugby has gone tits up and has basically gone to the national competitions rather than a universal Southern Hemisphere one, is because it was just unsustainable. And there weren't, I mean, the amount of basically empty seats at games, there was hardly any people watching. It was like they were playing in front of five blokes and a dog. And you've got these massive stadiums with hardly any fans watching the game. So Super Rugby was unsustainable long term. I think they did the dirty on the Sunwolves and the Western Force originally. So what was the point of expanding in Japan if you're going to then boot the team out the comp? They played an attractive style of rugby, to be fair, good running style. Um, Heavily weighted towards the New Zealand teams, which in my opinion does nothing for the competition. The South African teams obviously went, well, we're getting shafted as well. So the South African teams basically, even before COVID, were like, we're going to leave. Um, and then you look at Rugby Australia with the whole Israel Folau saga that's done irreparable reputational damage to both Folau and the organisation over the last couple of years, which has caused massive financial problems that's had to be settled outside of court in the end. There was an out of court settlement. And question marks over Rugby Australia's policy with regards to, instead of developing the youth game and the game in Australia paying league players massive overs to swap codes for a short, brief period to try and get the team over the line. Um, and they haven't won the World Cup since 1999. There was a period 20 years ago where the Australians had the best team in the world, and they were selling out stadiums, and they beat the All Blacks regularly, and they beat England regularly, and now it's laughable. The state that Australian rugby union is in. I mean, yeah, they beat the South Africans twice, but you could argue South Africa's had a very disrupted last 2 years, where Australia and New Zealand have actually played a fair few games, and you know, the Australian rugby union domestically is really, the Sheffield Shield is not good quality. They're not developing player talent, and they're reliant on these mercenary league players, paying them stupid money rather than developing players from scratch, working outside the public school system in the state school system, competing against league and Aussie rules. They're going, nah, we're going to leave the working classes to it, or those middle classes that um, would rather play league and union, league and Aussie rules. We're not going to attempt to encroach and actually, try and give some competition there. They've surrendered the initiative to the other codes. They're seen as an elitist sport, much like rugby union seen as an elitist sport here. So their image isn't great in regards to player recruitment from poorer backgrounds. And as I say, yeah, they are paying overs to get the league players over to try and boost them a little bit and get them over the line. And it hasn't worked since 1999. To a certain extent, 2003, they make the final again with several, like Matt Rogers, Lottie DeCury, and Wendell Saylor in the side. But when you take that back three out, that is a very average Australia side in regards to their backline, apart from Larkham and Gregan and Matlock. The depth there wasn't there. So, Rugby Australia, they're in trouble. And it divided public opinion. But you look at it, they've done untold reputational damage to themselves, and you know they're losing the grassroots battle to league and Aussie rules in a country that's sports mad, where it's a race to get the talent, and the amount of league players that at some point played union at school or out in the community youth level that have decided to go with league because there's more money. Not a massive amount of money at the lower grades, but there's money there. Same with Aussie rules; they're losing out on expanding the game, and they're seen as elitist when it comes to the the schools that do participate when it comes to playing in the school. Same with union here. France is different, so we're talking about countries where it's state funded schools or fee paying schools. New Zealand and France is completely different, but predominantly in England it's private schooling. Same in Australia, where unions play. So and that then just um, does nothing to grow the game. We're talking about rugby league. Billy Slater has obviously been announced as the new Queensland coach on a 2-year deal. There are some saying he should have been given the job last year rather than Paul Green. Now, there is a huge risk with having Billy Slater as the new Queensland State of Origin coach. He's got no first team coaching experience as the head coach. He's been an assistant. He's worked with individual players like fullbacks and halves in attack and defence, but he's never had an assistant role as being an assistant to help the head coach at an NRL club or a Super League club. So there is no head coaching experience for Billy Slater. That is a high pressure job, and the talent depth of Queensland is a lot less right now than it is for New South Wales. So he's working with a smaller talent pool of quality players. So that's going to be interesting. It doesn't always work. Laurie Daly managed to, I do admit. Well, Laurie Daly did manage to win one State of Origin series, but his record wasn't great, and he was a superstar player. You could argue Mal Meninga. It's worked with him at Australia and Queensland. You could argue Freddie Fittler. It's worked at New South Wales. He did have the best club coaching career, but it doesn't always work. Being a superstar player doesn't make you a superstar head coach. In a variety of sports, many have tried, many have failed, very few succeed. Normally, it's the guys who are average players who end up being pretty good coaches. Um, um, so yeah, we'll see what happens with next season State of Origin with Billy Slater and the impact he will have or hopefully has on Queensland. Um, they have got some talent coming through, but their depth is not as good as New South Wales at this point. If we are discussing obviously the grand finals coming up, that's very hard to predict. NRL expansion, obviously, it's looking like the Redcliffe Dolphins are going to be the 17th team. There's got to be an 18th team added to the competition at some point. That an announcement will be given soon on who's actually won the bid to be the 17th team for the NRL. And speculations going Wayne Bennett's going to be coaching that team. They're going to try and recruit some high-profile Queensland players to form the leadership core. Obviously, with rumours the Super League is going to be contracting, how many Australians and British players migrate to the NRL in the coming years? That's going to be hot for debate and discussion. So yeah, there's all that to discuss. There's something else I'm wanting to discuss, and that is a thought process in regards to the peptide scandal of about a decade ago, and how the AFL and NRL are still feeling the effects all these years later from that scandal involving sports scientist Stephen Dank, the Essendon side of it, the Cronulla Sharks side of it, and the individual players who played at other clubs who were associated with that. There are still players who were caught up in that 2012, 2011, 2012, 2013 period, that period of time where it was going on, plus the investigations, plus the bans that then followed on, that are still active participants playing, that are not all the facts and figures have come out. They're not all the facts have come out. Not all not interviews have been given, and ex-players and current players who were caught up have been very guarded in regards to what they say. And obviously, as time goes on and more players retire, because there are still active players on the Essendon list or active in the AFL, and there are still players in the NRL, a handful, who are still plying their trade or not even winding down their careers at this point, Wade Graham being one. And I was watching a podcast with Bo Ryan, who's an ex-Cronulla player, and he had just signed for the club when all this news broke, and they didn't know what was going on. And there was a lot of mistrust, and there was a lot of uncertainty in regards to the whole process. And they were saying players who've signed since this time leave the room. Players who signed before this time, you have to sit in on a conversation. There was some knowledge of deliberate cheating, but then it came out that Shandor Earl, who'd never played for the Cronulla Sharks, ended up getting a 4-year ban. He did return to play. He retired at the end of last season. He got caught up in it. He was one of those individual players. This guy Stephen Dank, this sports scientist, very murky individual. Not a lot. When you look at his Wikipedia profile and you look at bits and pieces of him online, there's not a lot of information on him prior to his involvement with Essendon, his involvement with Cronulla, and his involvement as an independent with other clubs and individual players and athletes. Because I do believe that this scandal this period of time impacts more than just the AFL and more than just the NRL. Because some of these high profile athletes will have a player agent or a sports agent who may represent multiple sports. So I honestly believe that there were contacts made within the sports world outside of the team environment or the athlete environment. And I do think more will come out in regards to what went on a decade or so ago. Because I do believe the impacts are still being felt. Essendon haven't fully recovered from then. They're still bearing the scars, and Cronulla, there's still a shadow over that team, especially with Brandon Sherry and his drug suspension. There's still that lingering shadow of mistrust um, within within the media, within both leagues, and the fan bases. There's still that lingering mistrust, and there will still be those who call the players, some of whom were completely caught up in it and were duped and were the fall guys, because they didn't realise they were doing anything wrong, as drugs cheats. And the way the Essendon side of things was handled was far more complicated than the Shark side of things. Um, and the way Shandor Earl was dealt with was pretty crap. But he was given a route back into the game, and he played, and he obviously was part of the grand final winning team in Melbourne last year. But his career was drastically impacted by the scandal, and you know, while he's done well for himself since retiring and all that. The peptide scandal in Australian sport, I do believe there is still lingering after effects, and there's still things we're yet to find out. And I think until all the participants who were playing have retired, we may not know the full ins and outs of what happened 10 years ago. And I think I'm going to do a video on it and why the NRL and AFL are still feeling the effects of the peptide scandal. Because there are still suspicions out there. There's still, I think, not everything's been fully clarified, and it's very weird. There's not a lot, as I say, about this Stephen Dank character there's not a lot about him in regards to his involvement in sports science. I mean, I'm going to try and find out as much as I can about Stephen Dank just by going on online. Let's see what we can find out. Let's see what we can find out about him. Stephen Dank. Here we go. He's a bio. Oh, here we go. Let's see what I can find out about Stephen Dank. Stephen Dank is an Australian biochemist who worked as a sports scientist with National Rugby League clubs such as the Sea Eagles, the Essendon Football Club, and the Gold Coast Suns. So he did actually have more to do with what was going on than I thought. He is known for his unorthodox treatment and diagnostic methods, including using calf blood and profiling DNA. Des has to describe Dank as a great analytical thinker, in particular highlighting his contributions in the area of GPS applications, statistical science, and altitude simulation training. In light of his unorthodox treatment methods, in 2016 he was given a lifelong ban from association with the AFL. The doping scandal, obviously, we know what happened at Essendon in 2013. Very early on, pre-season, they announced they had been asked by ASADA, which is the Australian Anti-Doping Agency, to investigate the supplements program from the 2012 season. A former player, Kyle Reimers, had basically claimed that players were asked to sign waivers and reject the supplements that were pushing the boundaries. So an ex-player had basically blown the whistle. Another former player counted that injections were only vitamins and were completely legal and not on any doping list. Dank left Essendon at the end of 2012, and high performance manager Dean the Weapon Robinson was suspended from the club after the investigation. Stephen Dank controversially admitted to a Fairfax journalist that he'd been using thymosin beta-4 in Essendon players. Another journalist pointed out that was prohibited under Section 2, under its S2 classification under WADA. Dank hesitated and then seemed extremely surprised. Well, that must have been and he claimed it was obviously that's new. In 2015, the AFL found him guilty of trafficking in a number of illicit supplements and banned him from any association with the AFL for life. And then most other sports organisations in Australia have done the same thing. Dank was found not guilty of 21 other charges, including trafficking charges and all charges related to administrating supplements. Dank appealed the 10 guilty verdicts against him, but the appeals were dismissed after Dank failed to attend the session scheduled for him with the AFL Appeals Board. Wilder obviously lodged an appeal against his not guilty verdicts in 2015. Following a publication of the Australian Crime Commission report into organised crime and drugs in sport, lawyers acting for Dank launched a 10 million defamation suit, including against News Corp for falsely accusing him of providing illegal drugs to elite athletes. And John Manor, who was a player who died of cancer and contributed to his relapse. In March 2016, a jury found that most of the accusations were substantially true and that he'd acted with reckless indifference to the health of players. He was also linked to other things. There was a drive-by shooting against him, and it was reported that he'd entered bankruptcy. But there's not a lot about him, basically, apart from that he worked with professional teams. So the fact, there's Gold Coast Suns and Sea Eagles says to me that there's going to be more players that eventually, when they decide to come clean, go, you know what, this guy was doing this, and the Sea Eagles actually managed to win a comp in this period of time. And but there's not a lot really about him. And again, this is where weak governance comes into it. When you have weak governance, things like this, where an individual can do what he's done, and the fact it was a drive-by shooting in 2016, criminal elements, because a drive-by shooting that is serious. That someone's trying to bump this guy off. It says to me there's more to this story than we know about, and I'm going to do a video on it. I've been reading up on it all again. I've done a video on the Essendon Football Club. I think I've done a video on the Cronulla Sharks as well. But I do believe that the fact that he didn't just work for Essendon, he worked for other teams, and individual players got caught up in it, as like Shandor. It says to me that, I think there's more to come out about that period in Australian history. And when you've got a high-profile coach like Des Hasler saying, he's analytical in his mind, it does raise questions that maybe should have been asked at the time, because honestly, in my opinion, there's a lot of unanswered questions there. Obviously, we know what happened to Essendon, we know what happened to Cronulla, we know what happened to the players who got backdated bans. The way that was dealt with was, I think, poor. Could have been dealt with better. But we know about the suspensions. We know, Asada and Wilder obviously got involved, and then there was punishments handed out, fines and suspensions, and all that. But at the same time, I don't think that's the end of the scandal. I still think that there's more. No, you cannot say that word in here. Nope. If you, no. Why? Because it's racist and vile and completely ignorant and will not be tolerated. So, cannot believe people still do that. Like, oh no, but not not the not the point. So I cannot believe that that is just ridiculous, in my opinion. But in regards to the supplements scandal, I do believe Australian sport is still feeling the effects from that all these years later. Um, so, and whether the stain is ever fully removed, I don't know. It's you know, um, it's one of them in regards to. Let's have a look at the old sports news. But no, in regards to the supplement scandal that involved the NRL and AFL, as I say, that Stephen Dank, there's not a lot of information on him on the internet. Uh, so obviously the US have won the Ryder Cup. Um, Moeen Ali is retired from Test cricket. That's interesting. Um, let's have a look at what Moeen Ali said about his retirement from Test cricket. England all-rounder Moeen Ali has announced his retirement from Test cricket, but will continue to play limited overs internationals. He's 34. He scored 2,194 runs. He's taken 195 wickets in 64 tests, and he made his debut in 2014. He won the 50 over World Cup in 2019. He's in the preliminary squad for this year's T20 World Cup. There's a comment section. So Moeen Ali has announced his Test cricket retirement. I think it's a shame that a player of of his standing has retired at this point. Um, and yeah, I'll have to do a video on that. But yeah, Moeen Ali has retired from international cricket. That's breaking this morning. So I don't think he quite reached his full potential. I don't think. Maybe he should have. I think I don't think I don't think he reached his full potential. That's not to say he was a bad player. Um, but uh, the in regards to uh, in regards to him as a player, he's a brilliant player. Could have scored more Test runs. Could have got more Test wickets. I don't think I don't think he fully achieved everything he could have achieved in the Test game. He went through a few periods where his batting average just wasn't great. He lost a bit of confidence, and he became quite. He was a confidence player, and there were periods where he didn't quite keep up the batting average. Didn't quite um, maintain his level in the game. Um, but yeah, um, but at the end of the day, I think he's an underrated player. So I've got to do a video on Moeen Ali retiring. But yeah, like I think he was a good role model for um, Anglo-Pakistanis, so the people from the Pakistani community here in the UK to enter professional sport, not just cricket. I think he's done a lot there as a role model there. Um, and yeah, in my opinion, he was a decent all rounder. I think he didn't quite reach the levels I think he should have reached, but maybe he should have entered the Test arena a little bit sooner. Um, but not a bad player. But when you're an all rounder and you're following after players like Freddie Flintoff in the game, um, and Ian Botham, you've got those kind of all rounders who are very high profile, it's very hard to follow in the footsteps of players who trailblazed that kind of bowling, batting, middle order role before. But a solid player, not outstanding, didn't quite fulfil, I think, his potential. And there were periods where his form did dip and he was under the spotlight for struggling, but such is the way with professional sports. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll have some more videos for you soon.